What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates. I'm gonna do some shares real quick. Let me turn the air off as well. Yep, do some invites, some shares real quick, and I'll get this thing started. Just give me a second. Like I said, just doing a couple shares. Then I'm gonna get started. So just bear with me. It's been a while since I've given an update on the COVID-19. I did a quick video yesterday talking about why I was, in a sense, happy that I was vaccinated and lucky. So that was on the Facebook and the IG page. But I wanted to give some, updates. Some of y'all may know last year I was giving a lot of updates, especially when the COVID pandemic started, if you will, just digging into the science, just trying to give people the correct information. And so now that the mask mandates are, in a sense, coming back here in Atlanta, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottom offered, a mandate for the city of Atlanta for public places to return to masking. So I wanted to, let y'all know what I've dug in and found out about, again, just through the research. I know there's always a lot of misinformation, a lot of skepticism, rightfully so. I always give credence to that understanding. What I always say to people who are extremely skeptical, again, I'm still sharing right now, so just bear with me. I'm going to do some individual invites, and then I'll get started. Hold on, let's see here. Share to some groups now. I'm going to do some individual invites. So just bear with me as I do this. All right, let's see here. Let me do 10 invites, and then I'll jump on this thing. All right, let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, there we go. All right, y'all. So let me go ahead and get this thing started. Just give y'all some updates. All right. So I want to dig into, again, where the mask mandates were coming from. Just kind of get the right information. When I say right information, I know a lot of people are hearing a lot of things. And so a lot of times when you, in a sense, get the information from the mass media, I understand that, people distrust that information. And so my goal throughout the pandemic, especially last year when I was doing these videos consistently, was to try to give people, the best information that I could find, in the research. Because what I've always told people, at the end of the day, this is a health crisis or a pandemic in relation to, from the idea that, in a sense, we should listen to the scientists versus the politician, or the scientists versus the politicians or the media for that matter. And I'm not talking about even Dr. Fauci, if you will, because again, him being tied to the government, there's, in a sense, influence in how that messaging comes across. And so, again, skepticism, I've understood it throughout the pandemic. If you just now, this is your first time seeing me, I have been an advocate of the vaccine from the beginning. I actually entered a vaccine trial. If it's your first time hearing me talk about this, just to kind of get that out the bag right away for those who've listened to me before. A lot of you know that I was in the Novavax. I'm still currently, I guess, in the Novavax vaccine trial. So I wasn't allowed, in a sense, to take the Pfizer or the Moderna one, but I'm vaccinated through Novavax, who's still, in a sense, going for FDA approval. So I just wanted to give that backdrop again. If this is your first time hearing me talk about or give a COVID update, again, my name is Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, with the Mental Dialogue Community Club. And so, again, I just did some research to understand where these mask mandates were coming from. And the research, again, being not, in a sense, listening to the news. Sometimes when you hear even the correct information, it can be, in a sense, confusing confusing from the standpoint of sometimes you're only hearing part of it. And I know it can definitely be confusing from the standpoint of, we got the vaccines and the mask came off. And so now that there's, in a sense, the CDC is suggesting that the mask should return, it obviously looks like a kind of, I'll excuse the language, a clusterfuck if people don't know what's going on or the CDC doesn't know what's going on. So I know that's exactly how it looks. And so the sentiment quite often is, I've even heard people say, why get the vaccine if you can still get it? And so I wanted to go in detail to explain exactly what's happening now, just to give people the correct information. And hopefully y'all will share this with others so that people can hear the details. Because as I always tell people, it's absolutely valid to ask the questions, to be concerned, to be skeptical. But a lot of times the answers are out there, and a lot of people don't take that step to actually get the answers to their questions. And then last but not least, my interest, I love researching, so I'll say my interest and desire to research the correct information is not me trusting them or they or the media. That's the information you're about to hear is stuff that I went to find out. Let me find out exactly what's going on, because getting a sound bite on social media or even just tuning into the news for a slight minute, it's not that I'm saying that they're trying to give you the wrong information, but just the way the news and media is set up, quite often, unfortunately, is hard to get the information that you need or a full understanding of what's going on. So here's the reality of what's going on. So the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, obviously, I don't have to explain when they came out or whatever, but pretty much when they were launched, there was concerns about variants, which we heard that, right? Different variants. When they first launched, there was a variant in South Africa in particular. I think that was variant, if I remember the number correctly, was like 357, was a huge concern. And right when and the reason that was a huge concern, because the studies at the time, it was coming out of South Africa, was showing that the vaccines that were at least out at the time were not necessarily very effective. Right when the Moderna one was released, there was another variant, B.1.1.7, that released at the time. At the time, Dr. Fauci mentioned that the current vaccines were were showing in the early studies to be pretty effective against the B.1.1.7 or whatever, but that was a new variant or whatever. Now we're hearing about the Delta variant. So to a degree, the 357 one, in a sense, maybe didn't really reach to America. I mean, there was a few cases that got to where it got into America, but that was coming up through South Africa. There were issues in Brazil and South America with the 357. The B.1.1.7 pretty much proved to be the Pfizer and the Moderna proved to be pretty effective against them, so we didn't hear a lot about it. But now we're hearing about this Delta variant, right? And so just to again, just bear with me as I kind of try to walk through this process. Just being a science enthusiast. I'm not a scientist, but I like to go read what the scientists are saying, because I don't want to get my information from the media, the politician, or even a scientist that's tied to our government, if you will. I like to go see what are the scientists saying out there, what's being reported, and that stuff is out there if you wanted to, get into it versus just dismissing it. So anyway, with that said, so what's in particular, from at least what I've been able to gather at this point from the research that I've been able to find, so this Delta variant, which we had been hearing about, kind of hearing that it was a concern. And so, in a sense, instead of saying they don't know what they're doing, we went from, finally saying people that are vaccinated can take off the mask, and now we're hearing about mask mandates. So on surface, without looking into the science, that can seem like they don't know what they're doing. Well, what's happening is science is doing its job from this standpoint. And when I say science, I always like to be clear. I'm talking about the methodology. It's not about, it's not about necessarily whether I trust what someone is saying. When it comes to science, we always talk about there's no better place to, in a sense, try to back up what you're saying with the actual science or data to back it up. Some, can people be influenced to say things that are not true? Humans can be humans, absolutely. But the thing about science is when you put something out there, if you don't have the data to back it up, then people will call, the science world will call you on and say, hey, where's your data to back up what you're saying? And so I wanted to say all that as I walk through what seems to be available. And, it's probably more than I did a pretty decent research. And so I'm going to share that with you now. So what we're seeing now isn't a situation of they don't know what they're doing. It's science doing its job from this standpoint. So I've explained this part on other videos. Science will consistently test anything that is studying. And so and when it tests something, it'll say, hey, here's our findings at this point. And then when it continues to test, the findings can be consistent, or with more testing, the findings can be inconsistent. And the beauty of science, and this is again, and I'm trying to be very clear, the methodology of science. So the beauty of science is that it will report early findings have been consistent, they were correct, or actually now we're finding with more time or more study that the early findings or early thoughts were incorrect. So quite often when you see a switch of mask, no mask, it's usually because they have more data points to kind of point towards, maybe we should have a mask or maybe we shouldn't. I'm just using that as a small example. So let's get into it specifically in reference to this Delta variant. So this Delta variant, the initial information seemed as what they thought was that the current vaccines were going to be okay with it. That was the early studies. Because here's one thing, let me want to make this very clear, and then I'm going to go specifically into the Delta variant. So one of the things that people, that I won't say people, just as I studied it, became very aware of from the very beginning of this thing, in a sense, this pandemic starting or whatever, in a sense, the scientists, I'm not talking about the politicians, I'm talking about these guys who just literally do their studies and are nerdy about it. They don't care what the politicians are saying, right? So from the very beginning, they've always understood that the race against the virus, the human race against this virus, was from a standpoint of, so you start out with the social distancing, trying to slow down how many people the actual virus gets into by social distancing. In this case, it was an airborne virus, so that's where, in a sense, where the mask came from. I'm not arguing how effective masks are or not. I'm just talking about the concept of, from the beginning, what the scientists are hoping to do once this, in a sense, became a worldwide pandemic. This is what they do even when when like the Zika and those things, they got contained and didn't become worldwide pandemics. But the process is the same, whether it gets contained regionally or spreads worldwide. So the process is distance people, try to slow down the spreading, because the biggest thing is if it gets into too many people, you're going to have genetic modifications that while they're preparing and trying to get a vaccine on the front end and maybe an antiviral drug on the back end, meaning once you have it, we have something to treat it. So as they're trying to get both of those medicines out, in a sense, they're trying to make those medicines based on how the virus looks at the time, if you will. And if it gets into too many people, then it creates genetic modifications, which is what all viruses do. But the concern is, can it genetically modify, past the point of being effective? So that's kind of what's going on with the Delta variant specifically, right? I kind of mentioned a couple other variants, one that was out of South Africa that they thought to be ineffective. The initial one that dropped at the Moderna, they were not as concerned. The studies kind of held up on it. But the Delta variant, here's what they found. So this particular variant is actually showing with more study, because when it first dropped, we'd already kind of started coming out of the mask, if you will. And so the initial studies say, hey, we think it's effective. The think it's effective part, and again, this is the science. So I know saying I think it's effective sounds like they don't know what they're talking about. Let's understand what that means. So the science was what they still know and have figured out, that the Delta variant has still been pretty proven against the main concern with the vaccines. Here's what's been lost with the delivery of these current vaccines. Here's the messaging that the CDC is going to now clean up, try to clean up. It's going to be pretty hard to do now because of how they roll their messaging out. But I want to be real clear. So the biggest point of the vaccines, again, being done within a year's time relatively quickly. I've done another video explaining that, so I'm not going to explain that part here. But the biggest concern was stopping sicknesses, very bad sicknesses, and deaths. So when they rolled out the high efficacy numbers, a lot of you may have heard it, the high 90% on the Johnson and the Moderna. On the Moderna and the Pfizer. The Johnson one, which was the one shot, was around 80%. Those efficacies were concerned with actually the SARS-2. Let me explain this if you're first time hearing me. So the SARS-2 virus is actually what you catch. And then if your body can't fight it off, you develop the disease of COVID-19. Again, some of y'all have rocked with me, so y'all already know that. But again, I just like to be clear. So what the vaccine has done, the vaccines that they have particularly developed in this time frame has been to protect you against bad sickness and death. And so because that wasn't really made clear, we have some vaccines, like if you were born in a hospital in America, 90% of Americans especially I'm 47, so unless you're older than me, 90% of us have 16 vaccines in us already. Some of those vaccines actually prevent you from even getting the viruses. Some of the vaccines do. And so because we have that knowledge base, when we hear that this vaccine was going to get dropped, we were anticipating how we assume other vaccines have worked, that they would keep you from getting the virus. And so when they initially came out, I saw the lead, I think I'm saying it right, the lead epidemiologist for the country. I don't remember his name, but he broke down in a sense in their haste. They were so focused on stopping the disease that when by the time they rolled out, they had to test to see if it actually stopped you from getting the virus. So every vaccine we get isn't necessarily effective from keeping you from actually getting the virus. And so that wasn't explained to us in the public. The only reason I know it is because there's a scientist explaining like, we're good on nobody dying from this. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. I'm actually in a, you might have missed the beginning, Tika, but I'm actually in a vaccine trial. So I actually got started the trial right before Moderna and Pfizer got approved or whatever. And because I was in the trial, I'm with golly, I just said it a few seconds ago. Slipped my mind. The company I'm with, Novavax is the company I'm with. Trying to see your question here. Let me see here. Hello. See if I can see your whole question. All right, yeah, absolutely, and still recommend, and we'll recommend, Tika, that you consider getting the vaccine. I'm just trying to give clarity on what's happening now because I absolutely understand with all the fear that's surrounding the vaccine that to think what's happening now as these mass mandates come back, it looks like more confusion, and so I'm just trying to walk people through the science of that. It's actually not confusing. This is what the science is showing. Again, I said in the beginning, science will continue to test. So the initial Delta variant, they thought that the vaccine, they were hoping or thought that the Moderna and the Pfizer were going to be effective against it. And what it has been proven to be is still effective at about a 90% efficacy against bad sicknesses and deaths. But the Delta variant has actually been proven to be more contagious. More contagious from the standpoint of, they said it's similar to chickenpox or the common cold. So you can actually get it easier than the previous COVID, SARS-2 virus. That's what this Delta variant is proving. And the only reason I know this is because this is available if you go look up the science. And so I always like to highlight that for those, in a sense, who don't trust science and those type of things, I keep trying to tell people that if you go look it up, the science will tell you exactly what's happening, the good and the bad. So, and if you continue to listen to this broadcast, you'll see why I don't necessarily trust the government or the CDC. Like a lot of times, because I am a vaccine advocate and because I love science, people will think I'm trusting these people. I'm like, no, people that do this much research, we don't trust nobody. That's why we go do the damn research. But anyway, just kind of walk back through what's happening with this Delta variant. So what the science has shown is that it actually is more contagious and it's quicker or whatever. So what happens is they were initially suggesting that the breakthrough cases, which you keep hearing about, which is obviously very scary with the concept of, is like you heard me explain it earlier, the vaccines were rolled out focused on stopping you from getting disease, not necessarily stopping you from getting the virus. And so once they rolled them out and tested them, they found out that to a degree that the vaccines were pretty good at keeping you from getting the previous variants. But they didn't roll them out with that intention, and that didn't get explained to us in the public, if you've been following what I'm saying. So anyway, again, I'm just trying to walk through the nuance because I want to be clear and make sure that anybody that watches this broadcast has at least the understanding that I have from going to do this research. So anyway, just kind of circling back to this Delta variant specifically. So it's proven to be much more, again, contagious than the previous variants, right? And so here's another aspect of it. So initially they were saying that the breakthrough cases were rare. They kept showing you those numbers or whatever. So again, by me going to dig into what the scientists have been saying, they called the CDC out on that. They called the CDC out because the breakthrough cases are not proven to be rare. They're actually now, and the CDC's having to own it. So that's where you're getting the mass mandates coming back. So what's happening is the breakthrough cases are, to be clear, is someone that has been vaccinated and now is being tested positive for the virus. Whereas this Delta variant has had 35,000 cases in the past week. So if you're skeptical and fearful, that 35,000 sounds like, oh, well, I'll get the vaccine. You're getting it anyway. Keep listening, and you'll understand why you still should get vaccinated or whatever. But initially, the CDC was playing down the breakthrough cases. 35,000 cases in 1 week is not a number that you can play down. Here's what the science is showing. So what happens is it's more contagious than previous variants. It's just as contagious as the common cold. So for those of us who have been vaccinated, so just to kind of explain the process, the vaccine goes in your arm. So your viral load, just by the viral load by nature is going to be here, it's going to move here. So because this Delta variant is so contagious, it actually gets into your nose cavity, into your throat. So the vaccine being given into your arm doesn't give you as much viral load here. It's going to be more here. The biggest concern with the SARS-2 turning into COVID-19 is how it might attack your lungs. That's when you start getting into the disease and hospitalizations, and sometimes when people are fighting off that, when they get those type of symptoms and fighting it off like that, sometimes it causes strokes, sometimes it causes heart attack. I've always continued to consistently mention, nobody ever talks about the 19% of those, while 1%, only 1% die, 99% recover. The real numbers are 80% recover with no hospitalization or no problem. 19% do recover, but they have long-term damage. And it's all kind of cases of what that long-term damage talks about. I always like to highlight this one number for every one death, which is, unfortunately 650,000 in this country alone, but it's for every one death, there's been 3 strokes kicked off from somebody who's trying to fight it off. Their body responds and causes a stroke. Their permanent damage comes from the stroke, not from COVID-19, but the COVID-19 fighting it off was why they had the stroke, if that makes sense. I always like to highlight that because a lot of times people always talk about 99% of people recover, but nobody talks about that 19% who's not going to ever get their quality of life back or whatever. So that's what on my last video, I said I was lucky that I was in the 80% and not in the 19%. Obviously, I didn't want to be nobody wants to be in the 1%. But anyway, so now getting right back to how this Delta variant is working. So because the viral load, because it's like more contagious, so they're now finding that even all those of us who are vaccinated, because of the viral load is not here, in your nose and throat cavities, and because of how contagious it is actually causing symptoms quicker than the previous COVID variants, if you will, this Delta variant specifically. So even people that are vaccinated are showing symptoms quicker. Whereas if you recall, one of the biggest issues with the spread of COVID-19 is how many people are asymptomatic. Because so many people are asymptomatic, there was this big concern about, well, that you don't even know you have it, so you're spreading it before you have symptoms. I've explained this last year. I'm going to explain it. I think it's important to explain this in this moment. So, for example, Ebola and things of that nature. So, viruses that have very bad, if the symptoms are immediate and there's not an asymptomatic period, it could be like Ebola was more dangerous, but you immediately had symptoms, and so Dr. Neil deGrasse talked about this. Like the advantage of a virus that has symptoms right away is that you can almost quarantine yourself. Just like when you have a cold at work, you may go to work, but you may say, "Hey, I won't touch your hand today," or you cover yourself up. And so you can actually keep others from getting it because you have the symptoms, if you will, right? And so the issue with COVID-19, which made it spread much faster, was the asymptomatic period was anywhere from 1 to 14 days, and you're contagious and giving it away unknowingly. So that made it spread faster, compared to some of the other ones. I always like to highlight that as well. So back to this Delta variant, which is showing symptoms very quickly. So now they've studied enough people and found out it's still the vaccinated people, are not experiencing the deaths. So the efficacy against the Delta is still good at 90% as far as causing hospitalization and deaths. So while, again, hearing that we got to put masks on and thinking this idea that they don't know what's going on, the science is what's speaking to why they're even suggesting masks again, even for vaccinated people in public places. And I'll give you the even more insight on that. The insight on this is actually moving away from the science for a second, because a lot of times, just move away from the science from this standpoint. Part of the mask mandates, even for vaccinated people, is because of this Delta variant being so contagious and spreading so quickly. Part of that messaging, because here's the scientific truth at this moment. They're not even certain how well the masks work on the Delta variant at this moment. They're going to need to do more studies. That's where we're at this moment. However, the mask mandate, I'm just giving you the real on it. Part of it, it's like, let me see. Hold on. Okay, let me see what you're saying here. I lost taste and smell since last Saturday. Took a test today. It came back negative. Mind blowing. Tika, did you take the quick test or the one that takes 48 hours or 72 hours to come back? I would highly recommend that you take the longer one. The quick test still comes back false positives, and I guess vice versa. Because I went through that as well, because I don't know if you recall, I had COVID in April, myself or whatever. And so I had a false positive with the quick test. And once I took the, did both came back negative for you? So I'm assuming that's what you're saying. Yeah, that's crazy. I know one takes longer to come back though. So one you get the same day. But I know for me, I almost didn't get to go back to work until my real test came. Well, I lost a day of work. I'd already had to be out of work for a few days anyway in April, but then I ended up losing more days until I forget which test is which now. I used to say them by name, but the rapid test versus I'll just say regular test for now. But that one came back okay for me, and that was the one that let me go back to work. So, but yeah, have you got the results back for both of them, Tika? Yeah, let me know. So anyway, let me keep walking through. Okay, so that one more, based on you just losing taste, because right now we don't know, I don't think we know of other diseases that make us lose taste, right? So more than likely, my guess is you're going to have a false negative, if you will, on the short one, but the one you get back tomorrow is probably going to unfortunately say that you got it, just based off that one symptom alone. I was fortunate. I didn't, Yep. All right, you got my man Jack on here. This dude, like Jack is way more scientific than me, so any information I get from him will be even more than what I've been able to look up in my eyes. But he says the biggest reason for the mask mandate is breakthrough infections of those vaccinated. Right. Some are asymptomatic and spread the virus unknowingly. Absolutely. So Jack Punty definitely is kind of, in a sense, someone I go to. Because he researches this and has access to more information than I do. So anything he says, so that's the biggest reason. And let me go and kind of walk through that for if it's your first time kind of hearing it. So I'm gonna reread this to make it clear for people that are listening. The bigger reason for the mask mandate is breakthrough infections of those vaccinated. Some are asymptomatic and spread the virus unknowingly, which is what I was just talking about, right? Here's another aspect of the mask mandate. Another aspect is to help encourage those who are not vaccinated, who are probably to a degree loosely still not wearing their vaccine, wearing their mask, because to a degree, what was the idea before this Delta variant started doing what it was doing, right? The idea was if you're vaccinated, you don't need masks, and if you're not, maybe still need masks. And so part of the mandate also is to encourage the unvaccinated who are at more of a threat in reference to the disease becoming, bad for them to the degree that it could cause hospitalization and possibly death. Again, as I just explained, the Delta variant is more contagious. It does, from at least what the studies are showing now or whatever. So even with the vaccine, it may be a breakthrough case, like we just said. But as Jack said, to a degree, a lot of asymptomatic, but you can pass it. I talked about that earlier in the video, right? So asymptomatic is never good in reference to being able to quarantine yourself. That's what it doesn't allow you to do. So you think you're okay, and you give it to others when you don't know it. So that's the absolute biggest issue with an asymptomatic, a virus that is asymptomatic before it actually shows its symptoms. So I've reiterated that, I think, pretty strongly, but just keep in mind when you get into the media, again, don't take the going back to masks as if they don't know what they're doing. The science is just kind of showing that, hey, with this one that's more contagious, as we had to do at the very beginning, the things that scientists are going to do with any type of virus that breaks out, a novel virus, if you will, the procedures are pretty much the same. Let's take these steps, spread out, let's social distance. Like I said, this was an airborne, so that's where the idea of the mask even came from. And so because of this airborne, they're going to take steps to try to slow it down while they can while they can figure it out. Yeah, Jack, I know you definitely broke that down. We're witnessing the very thing you and I talked about. Jack says the whole rollout was done wrong and now has to be completed. Absolutely. And just to even highlight what he's meaning here, because he and I have talked about this personally, was with the COVID, with the SARS, I should say it correctly, SARS-2 virus or whatever, being very similar to how the flu is seasonal. And so, to a degree, I know what Jack was saying that the rollout is really the wrong timing. Like we almost should have waited on knowing that the season would come back. So rolling it out too soon, we're going to be at risk, especially once we stop social distancing, stop wearing masks, and now we're running right into the season coming back. So there was that natural aspects of this type of virus and how it can be seasonal. And so that definitely didn't help with the rollout. So there have been many human mistakes made. So, again, so I'm not denying any of that. But again, I just wanted to do my best job to walk you through the science of it before you take one time they're saying this and one time they're saying that, to just kind of dismiss it all and realize that the science is backing up to a degree what they're saying now as far as taking precautions, even if you're vaccinated. Like I said, luckily, if you are vaccinated, you're going to be at less risk for becoming, one of those in that 19% or worse yet, that 1% that are still being taken out. Unfortunately, one of my members in the community club, her 2-year-old grandchild has COVID, and they and it's passed it along to her mother, and the grandmother just took her test, waiting for her results. But literally, the 2-year-old has it. All right, let me see what else we got from Jack again. If you're just now tuning in, this is the brother that Well, I call him a brother. I'll say that. That definitely knows more about this than me. He says it's creating escape variants due to unnatural pressure. Now we have to kill the king. Yeah. So again, Jack understands this science even better than I do. I'm a layman science enthusiast at best. This Jack understands it even better. So he's really just talking about now you're going to see that the scientific measures of what it takes to kind of at this point, as he already said, as he mentioned, the rollout was done wrong. Now there's going to be you're going to have to take scientific steps to even try to get this thing back under control. And so, as he said, it's creating escape variants due to unnatural pressure. Now we have to kill the king. So what you're about to see, and just keep in mind what you're hearing in sound bites. You know, it's been political since the very beginning. Unfortunately, from day one last year. From day one last year, I said I really hate that a health initiative is being rolled out and talked about by politicians more than science. And again, not science is attached to our government. I'm just talking about science in general. All right. Okay. Yep. Jack answered your question, Tika. Says, how do we kill the king? So basically 80% vaccinated at a minimum. And let's just walk through this. Basically just talking about the concept of herd immunity, which we heard a lot about last year. And so right now, to a degree, you should have a combination of those who, still may have not gotten the vaccine, if you will, but they've been affected. So they have a viral load that protects them. And then those of us that are vaccinated have a certain level of viral load to protect us. But yes, getting the population, as he said, to a minimum of 80% is what, because I talked about this in the very beginning. I don't know if I made this real clear. So the race against the virus getting into more bodies to create more variants. And so what Jack here is kind of mentioning is our population, if we, at a minimum, he said minimum, so it could be higher, but to a degree, if we were to get to a minimum of 80%, you now are limiting the virus jumping into more bodies to create more variants. And so if you can slow the variants down, then that's the concept of what he means by kill the king. So I hope that's clear for you, Tika and Jack. I hope I did a good job trying to explain that as well. But again, hadn't done an update in a minute, so I wanted to be very clear. I know it's a lot of confusion out there, and for those who are very skeptical, the back and forth and the changing of mandates and mass mandates makes people assume that there's something more nefarious than just the science, with more study, with more data points that are basically leading and guiding the steps that have to be taken, even with a bad rollout. Once the rollout was done bad, you're still have to kind of resort to the scientists to say, well, what do we do now? And I know people are afraid of that or don't trust science and all that kind of stuff in these days and time. But if you understand that the information I'm giving you is available out there, you can get the answers versus just dismissing it or letting the media lean you one way or the other. Let me see what else we got out here. All right. The vaccines, the vaccines can create escape variants, but no other choice now. We're currently at 56%. All right. Oh, beautiful to hear, Tika. Beautiful to hear. Like I say, my goal is just from day one has been just to give people the correct information so they can make, I guess, in a sense, the best informed decision that they can make with the right information versus the fear mongering. To a degree, people will even hear me attempting, and again, I'm not saying I got everything right, but people will hear me telling the numbers I tell, which are, I try to make sure I'm pretty accurate with it, but they'll hear those numbers as if I'm fear mongering, and they're just the numbers, they're just the facts, or whatever. So yeah, 56%. Like I said, Jack does this much more than me, so I always I'll call him sometimes when I don't understand what the hell I'm reading scientifically. Again, I'm an enthusiast. I like it. I like learning about it. And so don't let the science, again, humans are going to make errors. Something, in a sense, humans are not perfect. And I'm not saying science is perfect to a degree, but the methodology is just foolproof in the sense of just continuing to do it. And sometimes when somebody jumps out there with a theory, a scientific theory, that's wrong, if you will, because that does happen, then hopefully you'll have other scientists who do use methodology to correct it. And when there's not political influence, then the scientists will just say, oh, this is the better information, and go with the better information. I always like to highlight for those who are afraid of science, to a degree, science in itself is never afraid to say it's wrong. It's actually happy to correct itself when we're just sticking to the methodology. Let me see what else Jack is saying here. We should close all travel from South America, but that won't happen. Lambda, oh wow, Lambda is a worse variant than Delta. So I'm going to mention this quickly, and I'm going to go ahead and end this thing. Please share this video, again, just to get more people the correct information versus just being fearful of, because we're not trying to create fear, but like what Jack is talking about here. So we should close all travel from South America. If we just listen to the science, that's exactly what would happen. That's what I've been saying from day one. If science, to a degree, if they were leading this versus politicians. So we know it's political, and so as he said, that won't happen. Even though that's probably the smart thing scientifically. And I'm not saying science should be the only people making the decision, because scientists are not going to consider, the financial and the economics. That's not their concern to a degree. And I'm not saying all scientists are okay. I'm just kind of highlighting the difference between when it gets political versus just what the science says. So great recommendation from Jack that we would close the border. Not easy to do with the politics that are involved. So it kind of leaves us as citizens. Again, I don't trust these people either. That's why I do the research as best I can. So, we're kind of left to navigate, listen to the CDC, listen to the science, and try to do the best we can while not doing the best scientific answer of closing the border based on this. I didn't even know about the Lambda. That's why I love Jack so much. He's always ahead of me on this. The Lambda that's worse than the Delta. So we don't even know, I shouldn't say we don't know. I could go do research on Lambda and find out what the early stuff shows, if you will, right? So that's available. So we're not telling you about Lambda to be more fearful. It's just, here's all the information. And when you're afraid, go look it up and figure out what you should be doing as best as possible. And don't trip when science corrects itself. Don't say they don't know what they're doing. With more data points, they found out more. So hope all of that makes sense. I'm going to look at these last comments and get out this thing. Absolutely. I know. Jack says politics cause all of these problems on every level from inception until now. Been saying that since day one. Let me see what Tia said too. Thank you, Queen, for listening, by the way, too. Working in healthcare, can appreciate the science and your information. We see it from the lack of acknowledgement of the science. It's scary how non-compliant people are because of lack of knowledge. Yep, that's always the risk of lack of knowledge at any time, at a given point in history. Unfortunately, in the misinformation age, due to access to more information and people are able to just type up misinformation and make it seem believable, it becomes even more difficult, and lack of knowledge will be the very thing that, in a sense, we've always heard that lack of knowledge can kill you. We're living it out as we're speaking here. Let me see the last couple of comments I'm getting from Jack. Again, if you're just now tuning in or hear this later, this is my man that gives me more information than even I can find. He says the CDC got freaked out by the Provincetown breakout. That's why the rules are changing. Yep, over 600 people were infected, 73% double vaccinated in P-Town. 4th of July party. Absolutely. So what happened was, let me say this and then I'm gone. So initially they were trying to play down, and the CDC's been called out for this, they were trying to play down how this Delta variant was having rare breakthroughs. And then this situation in Provincetown, they could no longer play it down. The reality was these people were vaccinated and still got infected. And so they could no longer they were playing it down really before they had enough numbers, or maybe they had the numbers and were playing it down for the public. So that's the part where the politics starts becoming BS, where instead of just telling us up front what's going on, they'll play it down to get us comfortable, and then now they got to backtrack, and now they look stupid, we don't trust them, and we end up doing dumb stuff because we're not listening to the science anymore, because the CDC said one thing today and another thing the next day. So that's always the risk, unfortunately. And again, everything I got was not listening to the CDC. Yeah, I like to go see the battle that the scientists are having out there. All right, let me see what we got from Jack right here, and then I'm definitely closing this out. He says, the vaccines are working, yep, of the 900 cases related to the Provincetown cluster. So for y'all that are still on now, you're getting information that most people are not going to get in the news. So the news information, which can only be so long as a soundbite. I ain't even knocking the media for what they do. They only got a short period of time. So you're getting more information than you're going to get in the news. That's all I want to do is give you the information. So my brand Jack says the vaccines are working. Of the 900 cases related to the Provincetown cluster, there have been no deaths, 7 hospitalizations, and the symptoms are largely mild. Positivity peaked at 15% on 7/15 and was only 4.8% yesterday. The outbreak is contained. Unless you go find this information, you're probably not going to hear this in the media, or maybe it's on a soundbite you didn't hear, or on one news channel that said it and you didn't catch it. So for those that don't catch it, they're going to be moving in fear of Princetown like something else happened, or they're going to tell you other shit happened, and the reality is it's been contained, which is a good thing. But at the end of the day, the vaccines are working, especially for their original purpose. Again, the lead epidemiologist for the nation said when they set up the vaccines, they kind of rolled it out and didn't get concerned with, in a sense, keeping you from getting the virus, more so with keeping you from getting the disease. So that's been the risk, and that was never made clear in the beginning. So yeah, because people are still getting it, people are just coming to the conclusion that vaccines don't work. No, they are all working. From, as you just heard in this example, we had breakthrough cases, only 7 hospitalizations, no deaths. So our deaths, unfortunately, are still being those who are unvaccinated. That's the definition of working versus not working when you consider the original rollout, versus compared to other vaccines that, and I want to say this and I'm done, compared to other vaccines that we know about or have gotten in our bodies who actually stop us from actually getting the virus. These vaccines haven't proven that to a degree as of yet. So that's the difference. But if you were thinking that it was supposed to stop you from getting it, then of course you're like, that shit ain't working. No, they're working for the ultimate purpose, which is not being at 19% who receive permanent damage, or worse yet, that 1% that die. Didn't say this for fear. Just wanted to give y'all the right information. Please share this for those who need to hear or want to hear the correct information. Again, as best as I could find it. And my man Jack definitely always going to clean me up anytime he jumps on. So thank you, Jack, for that. Tika, glad to see you're finally, again, the more people we get vaccinated, getting to that 80%, we can stop hopefully these variants from getting beyond something that we can't handle. So COVID's here to stay, but over time, done right with science, it can become a nuisance like the cold. Right now, we're not at that stage. It's too early. The Spanish flu in 1918 took 3 years to get under control, and life expectancy dropped worldwide. We had COVID caused life expectancy to drop like a full year in the United States, and we haven't had that big of a life expectancy drop since 1920. So we had some 0.1 percentage drops over the last few years, but a full year drop, we hadn't seen that since 1920. So, and that was due to the COVID deaths. So that's all I got for y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in. Again, please share this. Don't run from the fact that I'm, an advocate, but the right information will keep people from just being skeptical and fearful. And don't just trust what I say. Go look up what I'm telling you. I think the numbers will hold up. And then there's going to be more information as they get more data points on this Delta variant. Something I'm saying today may not hold up in 2 weeks. Hopefully it does. But right now, what the information shows, the vaccines are working against severe hospitalizations and deaths. That's what they rolled out to do. Hopefully in 2-3 years, we'll have a vaccine that keeps us from even getting the damn thing. So that's just kind of the process of science. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm out. I'm your boy Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates. Tune in tomorrow for the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. Every Saturday morning we're doing Black women, what do black men think? Last week we had a dynamic show, which was the inverse of that. Black men, what do black women think? I had Latrice Ross and oh God, I'm tripping right now. I'm looking at I'm just looking at the queen's face right now and just can't say it. Just talked to her a few minutes ago. Latrice Ross and my girl Deasia Robinson. Major show, excellent show. Recommended you go back and watch it. I mean, listen to it. We're audio show only. And tomorrow I got on DeBeco's Chambers, brother that coaches a lot of black men, and to in a sense improve their lives. And a new brother I haven't talked to before, Torrance Mack, retired captain in the Army, quote unquote a man's man. So it's going to be a cool opportunity to kind of see how men are thinking out there. So check us out tomorrow right here on my Facebook page, or go to the Mental Dialogue Facebook page, Blog Talk Radio, and look up Mental Dialogue. We're live. So please call in and give us your 3 cents on tomorrow's discussion. We're looking for ladies' thoughts as well as men's thoughts as well. So look forward to talking to y'all in the morning. And again, share this with those who need the correct information.